Good morning. Today we're going to talk about the 8 steps for physicians in applying for an executive MBA program. My name is Dr. Roger Tomihama, and I'm an Associate Professor of Interventional Radiology at Loma Linda University School of Medicine. I've been accepted to the MBA program for executives at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania starting summer 2022. I have just gone through the entire process of applying for an MBA as a full-time practicing physician. My goal is to save you countless of hours of research that I did in learning about this process and condense it down to a series of high-yield, short, informative YouTube videos. If you like this channel, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more upcoming great content on business school for the physicians. Okay, so these are the 8 steps that you will go through as a physician in applying to business school. 1, have a discussion with your boss whether an MBA is feasible for you to do. Step number 2, standardized test prep. Step number 3, initial phone consultation with the program. Step number 4, CV and resume preparation. Step number 5, online applications. Step number 6, essays. Step number 7, recommendations. And step number 8, the interview. So before we begin, I want to just say for the record, I'm not an expert on the admissions process. I'm only sharing my N-of-1 experience and my opinions. There are many full-service professionals and business that are dedicated on MBA admissions, and I would refer to these seasoned professionals for the best advice for you. So unlike medical school or other traditional graduate programs, the admission committees for these MBA programs are not just looking for the best scores, grades, or extracurricular activities. I think admissions committees are really focused on trying to put together a well-rounded cohort of individuals of varying careers, industries, so that they can learn from each other and build a great network for the future. For many MDs, we feel that an MBA is often completely out of our wheelhouse, and thus we may not do well in business school. You know, things like finance, accounting, marketing, economics are typically topics that we don't work with on a daily basis and are not that familiar with. MDs traditionally only encompass about anywhere from 5 to 8% of any traditional executive MBA class, and thus your contribution to the MBA cohort might be quite valuable. One thing I'd like to mention about the admission process that I found was that it's more transparent than I expected compared to other programs when we applied for medical school or residency, etc. So in the past, when we applied to medical school or residency, you fill out the application, you send it in. It's kind of like a black box. You don't know what's going on there, and you may or may not, hear from the program whether you got an interview and go on to the next step within the process. I think the executive MBA admission process is slightly different than that. What I found in my experience was that a lot of the MBA admissions committee members or directors are probably the nicest people you will ever meet, and they are really straightforward with you. They will help you discuss your candidacy and kind of gauge your admissions probability to your program based on your background, work history, and etc. I felt there was no reading between the lines on discussions or emails with these members, and it's they're pretty straightforward with you. It's also not uncommon. I've heard of many admissions committee representatives or even sometimes directors having sort of informal, ongoing, open dialogue with you to help you throughout the entire process. Okay, so for the application process, let's go over the different steps. So step number 1 is have a discussion with your boss, both your work boss and your home boss, if an MBA is feasible for you to do. I recommend doing this anywhere from 6 to 12 months prior to the admission deadline. What you really need to assess is your feasibility away from work and home. So for instance, for at work, if you're going to attend some of these programs, you're going to have to determine whether you use vacation or reduce your full-time employment status to attend the program. So let's just say, for example, you're attending a program that's the typical Friday, Saturday, bi-monthly program. If you're in these programs, you're going to probably need anywhere from 24 to 36 calendar days per year to attend the classes. That being said, if you were to reduce your full-time employment status to 0.9 FTE, that would give you 26 calendar days a year off. If you went down to 0.8 FTE, you will get 52 calendar days off a year to attend the classes. Another consideration for feasibility is tuition. So again, tuition to business school is no joke. It's can be range from anywhere from $75,000 a year all the way to $200,000 plus for the entire program. Something to consider if you think, this is going to be a good return on investment for, attending the program. Third thing to consider for feasibility is your personal life and your family sacrifices for you attending the program. So as many of you already know, as busy MDs, attending life can be a juggling act as it is, right? If you're doing call, or doing administrative work for your group or organization. If you're in academia, you're doing research, writing papers, doing education, it's already a juggling act in itself. And if you were to throw on a full-time educational program on top of this, it's almost like throwing a chainsaw into the juggling act and keeping it all going. Okay, step number 2 in the process is standardized test prep. So if this is required for your program, I recommend doing this anywhere from 6 months to 8 months prior to the admission deadline. Okay, so for a little background, many of us probably took anywhere from 1 to 2 months, to study before taking your standardized test. And the short time frame for the study is mainly due to the fact that many of us were told in the beginning, that the executive assessment is like an easier version of the GMAT. You only need like 6 weeks to 8 weeks to study, you'll do fine. And like everyone else, I was told this and I fell into this group. That being said, the executive assessment is not an easier version of the GMAT. It's simply a shorter version of it. You just have less questions to take during the test. So after taking the exam, what I recommend is you should prepare for the executive assessment like you're preparing for the full GMAT. And I will go into detail in this in another video. So if I were to do it all over again, what I would recommend is studying for about a month, maybe and taking a practice test and seeing how you do. And again, I would do this probably anywhere from 6 to 8 months prior to the admission deadline. If you think you can score well on the executive assessment based on the format and subject material, then I'd say go for it. Just take the test, get it out of the way early, and be done with it. Now, if you don't score what you think you can get or what you need, then at least you have adequate time, i.e. at least 6 months to really buckle down, study the content, the strategy to score well on the EA or the GMAT. That being said, if you don't score well, don't worry. If your background and CV is very strong, this will often compensate for a slightly lower EA or GMAT score. Okay, step number 3 in the process is having an initial phone consultation with the respective program. I recommend doing this anywhere from 3 to 4 months prior to the admission deadline. So what happens in business school admissions is most times the first step is doing this, and this is almost like kind of the norm for the process. So what happens is you go to the program website, there's usually a link somewhere to get more information, have a discussion, and what you do is you fill out the information, you submit your CV, upload it, and then later on someone from the admissions committee gives you a call or sets you up an appointment to have a discussion. And when you have this discussion, it's almost kind of like an informal interview. It's kind of like a way for them to size up your candidacy for the program. I think it's helpful in 2 ways. One, it's helpful for you in getting more specifics about the specific program you're interested in. And the second is actually very helpful for you in giving information about yourself and your candidacy to the program to see if it would be a good fit for you. Step number 4 is CV and resume preparation. So for most of us, there's not a lot for us to do for this process. Most of us already have a CV that we have for our work, and it probably just requires some updating to complete some loose ends. Some programs do, however, require a standard business resume, and so these are essentially a shorter 1-page summary resume that summarizes your education, work experiences, some of your highlights of your career. There's a different template and process for this. You can find one off the web. I actually found one off MS Word. They had a good template that I used to help create my 1-page resume. Okay, step number 5 is the online applications. I recommend completing this or starting this process anywhere from 2 to 3 months prior to the application deadline. Most of the information that's required for the application can be inserted straight from your CV. However, there is some information on there that is not on your CV, and that usually relates to the specific organization that you're part of. So, i.e. if you work for a hospital or a large big group or business, you have to get some stats on the hospital group that you work for. And usually these stats include things like the number of personnel within the organization, its annual revenue in dollars, and in your place within the hierarchy of the organization or hospital that you're part of. Okay, step number 6 is essays. So yes, you will have to complete some essays for the application process. Most of the essays are pretty straightforward. However, they're usually questions about why you're interested in getting an MBA, why you're interested in the specific program you're interested in. There may be sometimes some essays about leadership characteristics or examples that you've gone through in your business career that they might ask about. There are some great websites and YouTube videos that give great advice about how to write good business school essays, and I defer to those experts for help with that. Okay, step number 7 is recommendations. This is usually done anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks prior to the admission deadline. You usually need 2 letters of recommendations, one from a supervisor, another one from a person of your choosing. And this is not a usual, a generalized, essay letter that you would write for a medical student applying for residency or so on and so forth. It's more of a hybrid of scoring personal qualities on a scale with some short text responses. It's actually quite similar to those hospital credentialing verification forms that we fill out for each other, and for colleagues when we have to re-credential, it's similar to that. Again, I would recommend giving your letters of recommendation writers anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks for them to complete this process. Okay, the final step of step 8 of the process is the interview. Again, I thought this was probably the easiest part to complete because most of the work you need to prepare for it, you've already done prior to in the admissions process with your application and your essays. I felt the interview was pretty straightforward. I thought it was more like a second kind of meet and greet discussion, very similar to the first discussion you had when you were first starting the entire process with the admissions committee representative. There weren't a lot of difficult questions about personality or scenarios or anything like that. I thought it was pretty straightforward. It's mostly, again, covering the topics that you kind of already covered in most of your essays. One thing that I will mention that some programs do actually allow you to do the interview even before you complete the admissions process. So it's a little different. I thought that was kind of interesting where you would do the interview even before you formally submit your application. Okay, so as I mentioned in a prior video, there are many great resources available about the admissions process. Again, the GMAT Club websites or YouTube channel are very good, Poets and Quants. Most of these websites and videos are usually focused on the full-time MBA applicant, but you can really glean a lot of information about what business school admissions committees or what the programs are looking for in candidates. Again, also I'd like to mention that I thought the program-specific websites were very good for this too. Well, that concludes today's video. Again, thank you for watching this video. If you have any comments or suggestions, please put them in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. Again, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more upcoming great content on MBA or business school for the physicians.